Start. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this PAS Defra Natural England webinar on statutory or national credits. We're joined by Tash Hunston from Defra. So I'm going to hand over to Tash to start this session. Thanks, Tash.
Yeah, hi everyone, and it's great to see so many people on the call. Thank you very much for taking the time to join. I'm Tash, so I'm the Defra lead for Statutory Biodiversity Credits. I've been in this post since February of this year. Prior to that, I was on a career break, and then before that, I've had roles in Defra for probably the last 7 years, mostly working on local nature recovery strategies, the Environment Bill, and climate adaptation and mitigation, amongst other things. So as I mentioned before, but I think that was before a lot of people joined, we are joined by Annabelle LePage, who is my counterpart at Natural England. So she leads on credits for the Natural England side. Vince, who is our team lead at Defra for credits and markets, and also I believe someone from the Natural England credits sales team in case there are any specific questions. Feel free to put questions in the chat if you'd like, and we'll come to them at the end of the presentation. So let's get into it. What I'd like to get out of this session is a quick recap of what biodiversity net gain is, and then get into a short overview of what statutory biodiversity credits are. Apologies if that is information that you know already. And then I'd like to get into the meat of the presentation, which will be the sort of developer and LPA journey. So what we would like local authorities to be looking at and thinking about when someone does buy a credit. And then there should be plenty of time for Q&A at the end. So as a very quick recap on biodiversity net gain, since April, it has applied to the majority of developments that are receiving planning permission under the TCPA. And for the purposes of BNG, we use habitat as a proxy for biodiversity. So developers have to deliver a minimum of 10% habitat uplift to achieve their biodiversity net gain when they're doing development. We know that developers are thinking about biodiversity net gain from the very beginning in terms of sort of where they're selecting their sites and things like that. But for the purposes of LPAs, and what I want to focus on this session is BNG is a post-permission pre-commencement matter. And for the people who are joining just now, I will share the slides afterwards, and there's a recording so you can always catch up. But it's a post-permission pre-commencement matter, which means that developers will have to show how they meet their 10% gain requirement once they've received their planning permission. And this is because it's only at this point that the site's plans are finalised and the final impact on the site is known. It's also worth mentioning at this point that habitats are classified according to distinctiveness, and if you have very high or high distinctiveness habitat or watercourses and hedgerows, losses have to be replaced with the same habitat type. So that could be an area where credits might come into play. And there are 3 ways that developers can achieve their biodiversity net gain, and we'll have a look at those now. These are probably fairly familiar. And we have a mitigation hierarchy, so there is increased preference, as you can see. So the number 1 that we would prefer developers to do is to avoid impacts and or enhance their biodiversity on site. And that is sort of incentivized in the metric. If they aren't able to do that, or they're not able to do that to fully meet their BNG requirements, they can enhance on other land holdings that they might have, or they can buy biodiversity units from third parties who are registered. But we obviously don't want to prevent or slow down development. So as a last resort, we do have statutory biodiversity credits, which are sold by government, and these will be reinvested in habitat enhancements, but they should be a very last resort to prevent development from stalling. So what are statutory biodiversity credits? So we call them statutory biodiversity credits because there are a lot of different credits schemes out there, and I just want to be sort of very clear on what we're talking about with this. So statutory biodiversity credits, they're a backstop, as I've said, and they should only be used when other options are not available. We really do want developers to follow the mitigation hierarchy with preference given to avoiding impacts and or mitigating on site. But they're there to make sure that the pace of development in England is not impacted by the introduction of mandatory biodiversity net gain. When a developer buys a credit, they buy it from Natural England, and the money gets paid into a central pot that's held by Treasury. Government is then required to spend the income as set out in the Environment Act. So we have to spend the income on either habitat creation or enhancement, the purchase or acquisition of land with the intention to create or enhance habitat, or the administration of the above. And we're also required to report to Parliament annually in February, I believe, on credits income received and what it has been spent on. We are currently scoping options for spending of credits income. It's fair to say that, and I'm sure you will be aware, that sales of credits have been very slow so far, but we are expecting them to ramp up. So we wanted to get this session in the diary so that everyone, so you guys, local authorities, can be ready when it does ramp up. So now, sort of getting into the meat of the presentation, and what I really wanted to focus on today is the kind of decision points that there will be for local authorities in the event that a developer, is buying a credit. So when a developer first enters conversations with the local planning authority or submits a planning application, if credits are to be used, the local authority should make an initial assessment of whether the mitigation hierarchy has been satisfied. It's better to do this as soon as possible because once a developer has purchased a credit, it's very difficult to get a refund. So we want to make sure that they are definitely satisfying the mitigation hierarchy before they purchase those credits. If the local authority is satisfied that the mitigation hierarchy has been followed and the credits purchase is necessary, and then planning permission has been granted, a gain plan should follow from the developer, which should include information on how the mitigation hierarchy has been satisfied, which none of it should come as a surprise because there will have been conversations already, and also a credits proof of purchase document that will have been issued by Natural England. And this credits proof of purchase should then be cross-checked with the metric to make sure that the right number of credits have been purchased for each tier as appropriate. And we'll get into that in a little more detail on both these requirements with screenshots so you can see exactly what needs to be done. It's worth saying that credits at this point, that credits are quite expensive for developers to buy. So this is a bit of a balancing act. We want to make sure that we're not undercutting the unit market, but we also don't want to price them too high to prevent development. And we do have the ability to change credit prices if we need to. Okay, so moving on to the next slide, and this will be about the gain plan and what the game plan should look like if it's justifying a credits purchase. So the game plan is where developers should be showing how they've met the mitigation hierarchy, i.e. looking first to do biodiversity net gain on-site or mitigate or just not have impacts at all, and then purchase off-site units in preference to credits. So the things you'd be looking for here would be perhaps an ecologist assessment stating that biodiversity net gain cannot take place or can't take place wholly on-site, perhaps some inquiry emails to at least 3 BNG unit providers showing that the developer has tried to buy units off-site and hasn't been able to, or perhaps a screenshot of the biodiversity gain sites register, which would show no unit availability for the required habitat type if they were in that very high hedgerow watercourse distinctiveness categories and there weren't the appropriate units available. So it should be fairly simple to see if the developer has made reasonable efforts to satisfy the mitigation hierarchy. And I will answer these questions at the end. I think that's probably a little bit easier. And then the other key point for local authorities to be aware of is how many credits have been bought. I think the dream would be for an integrated system, but we don't have that at the moment. So when a developer submits their gain plan to you, they will submit their BNG metric and they will submit their receipt of purchase from Natural England. And if you look at the metric, the tab which shows you the right number of credits that should be bought is the unit shortfall summary. So you can see that in the top right, it's circled in red, that tab. It's the third tab from the right when you're looking along the bottom. It shows how many credits for each tier should be purchased. So these range from A1, which is the cheapest tier, up to A5, which is more expensive for the terrestrial habitats. And then you can see there's a hedgerow and a watercourse tier as well. So think of unit shortfall here as a synonym for credits. If developers are falling short on on-site biodiversity net gain or off-site units, then they will need to purchase credits, and that will be shown here. Worth mentioning, you shouldn't be using the headline results tab to guide credit purchases. So developers should not be using that tab to guide credit purchases, and you shouldn't use that tab to check whether they've bought the right amount, because it doesn't include the spatial risk multiplier. So the numbers will be lower. If you look at the top, you can see that the number of credits that someone should be buying in the A1 tier is 2.4, and in the hedgerow it should be 1 credit. It's quite small and difficult to see in the headline results tab, but it is showing 1.2 for the A1 tier and 0.5 because the spatial multiplier has not been applied. So yeah, I mean, we can get into that in more detail, and if anyone would like to come with specific questions, they're very welcome to. So once you've managed to find the unit shortfall tab and you can see the numbers down on there telling you the number of credits that should be purchased in each tier, you should then take the biodiversity statutory credits proof of purchase receipt that the developer will have sent to you. And you can then see on that quite clearly at the bottom. So this is a kind of mocked up version where I've removed some of the details because I don't want it to identify anyone in this. But you can see on this form that it will say that the developer has purchased here 2.4 A1 credits and 1 hedgerow credit, and it tells you the amount of each tier and the total price. And from that, you can work out whether they have purchased the correct amount of credits. If they have, that's great. You can sign all that off, and if not, you probably want to get back in touch with the developer to rectify that through Natural England. So moving on, just as a kind of quick summary of what we've talked about, we'll just run through the kind of credits journey from start to finish. So the very first step in the journey will be the developer assessing whether their impacts can be avoided or mitigated on site. If they're not able to do that, the developer can attempt to mitigate on off-site land, or they can purchase biodiversity net gain units from the marketplace. If they aren't able to do that and they've tried 3 providers, they might decide to purchase biodiversity credits to allow development to proceed. And at this point, the developer should really be starting a conversation with the LPA about their desire to buy credits. And you should be satisfied that the mitigation hierarchy has been followed. At this point, a planning application will be submitted, and that will show, as we've discussed in the unit shortfall tab, the intention to purchase credits because they will have a unit shortfall. The local authority at this point should be satisfied that the mitigation hierarchy has been followed, and they would then issue a decision notice. Assuming that that is a positive decision, the developer would then submit a gain plan, which would include those 2 documents that we've talked about already. It would include how they've satisfied the mitigation hierarchy. It will include also the proof of purchase of credits document issued by Natural England. And that will allow the local authority to carry out the final checks, which will be finally signing off that the mitigation hierarchy has been satisfied, and then cross-checking the metric with the proof of purchase to ensure that the correct number of credits have been bought. And if both of those conditions are satisfied, the game plan is approved, and then assuming all other aspects are okay, then development can begin. So, and this is just it in another form. These are the 2 things that are needed, that the mitigation hierarchy is satisfied. That can be found in the game plan and an earlier conversation with developers. And we also need to check that the correct number of credits have been purchased, and that can be found in the unit shortfall tab of the metric, cross-checked with the credits proof of purchase document. And my final slide, I've included the mailbox for the Natural England sales queries, if there are any queries, and also my email address if you do have any questions or if you're struggling with anything. I understand that it's probably quite difficult at the moment because it's all hypothetical. So please do reach out to us if someone does say that they'd like to buy credits and you've got anything that you're not sure of. And yeah, happy to take any questions.
Brilliant. Thanks ever so much, Tash.